From Datarails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Today. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy, and you are listening to FP&A Today. FP&A Today is brought to you by Datarails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis and discuss some of the biggest stories and challenges in the world of FP&A. We will provide you with actionable advice about financial planning and analysis today. This is going to be your go-to resource for everything FP&A. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest on the show, Jeff Marx. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
And I know we're excited to have you. So a little bit about Jeff. Jeff comes to us from the Columbus, Ohio area. He graduated from The Ohio State University, majoring in business. And he's worked for Hexion for the last 21 years in a number of different finance roles. So maybe, Jeff, you could tell us just a little bit more about yourself. Take us, through your background in a little more detail and how you ended up where you're at today.
Sure. I've been with Hexion for 21 years. Hexion's a large global chemical manufacturing company headquartered here in Columbus. We've been through a number of mergers and acquisitions over the many years we've been here. I've had roles in internal audit, financial planning and analysis, controllership. I was the CFO of a business unit, and now I lead our Treasury organization. So, prior to coming to Hexion, I started my career in public accounting. As you mentioned, I have a bachelor's in accounting and finance and an MBA from Ohio State, and I'm a CPA and a CFA charter holder.
Great. So you have the CFA and the CPA.
Yes, I do. It's both very challenging, but both rewarding in the opportunities it has given me over the years.
Well, great. Now that's exciting. I'm glad it's given you those opportunities, and certifications definitely can help us stand out when needed. So that's good. So maybe can you talk a little bit? You mentioned I think your current role is VP, you're vice president, and you manage Treasury. So maybe can you talk a little bit about what all is entailed in your current role, what you're doing today?
Sure. We're managing the capital structure, the cash flow, the liquidity of the organization. We manage risk and credit. Our organization also works closely with the business and our private equity owners and running a 5-year model. And there's a lot of work that goes into that and understanding the drivers and the strategic initiatives that we're undertaking. And then we work with all kinds of stakeholders, our investors, our creditors, our vendors, in talking about what is going on with their business, what are the drivers, how we're performing, and making sure that we can clearly articulate, the story of Hexion.
Understood. So you're private equity held, and so I imagine a lot of your time is providing data to the investors and helping them understand performance.
Absolutely. So we have a great ownership team, and we work very closely with them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I could see where you'd spend a lot of time there. So I know a couple years, I think it was 2 years ago, you spoke at AFP regarding the finance passport.
Yes.
Can you tell our audience what that is? Maybe give them a little bit of an overview of what is the finance passport.
Sure. Maybe you could back up for a second and talk about how we got to this finance passport.
That'd be great.
A few years ago, we created a project with human resources where we were really struggling with how to articulate what a career path looks like at Hexion. And especially for some of the younger people that we've brought in the organization, saying, here is your current role. Here are the different opportunities that are available to you in the future. And we started with kind of reverse tracing some different individuals, saying, how did they get to where they are? And, what steps did they take? And, right away, it was clear that was going to be a very difficult process and not necessarily very meaningful, because everybody had somewhat of a different journey to how they ended up with where they are. So we're struggling with this. So we engaged Gartner, and what we found is that we were not alone in having these issues with defining what a career path looks like in finance, especially in a modern present day finance organization where, especially in a place like Hexion, where through the challenges of mergers and acquisitions, the organization evolved many times in the course of the last several years. What we found is that these traditional corporate ladders are really kind of a thing of the past, and people, given that these organizations are flatter and leaner, people end up spending longer times in their current role, and that creates a challenge too, because when it is time to make that jump, it's a bigger jump than it was in the past when you maybe had a little bit more ability to promote people more frequently and gradually take on more responsibilities. So with all that being said, it's, really the work what we found by working with Gartner is that these leading organizations are really taking a different approach, abandoning more of these corporate ladder type experiences and moving to more of these matrices where your next move might not necessarily be a promotion, but you can go from, say, business finance or FP&A to Treasury. You're going to get a lot of experience that you didn't get in your previous role, but that makes you a more well-rounded finance person, and that helps you continue to develop your skills and work towards leadership positions that require you to have more exposure across all facets of finance and not just kind of being in one silo. So the challenge was, how do you change this mindset from this corporate ladder type mentality to more of a journey? And what we developed is this tool that we call the Finance Passport. And the way we approached it is you have 5 different areas of finance, right? You have audit, controllership, business finance / FP&A, tax, and treasury / investor relations. And within each of those groups, you have different skill sets that you would hope to achieve if you spent some time in that area. And then on top of that, you always have leadership skills that you can develop that are broader, that can be really transferable to outside of finance, where we've had here at Hexion, we've had people move out of finance into procurement, into HR, and other parts of the business. Really, you can develop your leadership skills from any place in the business. And then ultimately, the overarching part of the passport would be the CFO skill set. And again, you don't necessarily need to be the CFO to start working on those types of skills. Really developing a CFO mindset, you can do that from lots of different places in the organization. So the passport basically creates an inventory of all these skills that you would expect to develop over a finance career, and you can rate yourself where you think you presently are on a scale of 1 to 5, and where you would like to be on a scale of 1 to 5. And it's color coded based on where you rate yourself. And this is all self-service. You do this on your own, and it's a tool that helps you say, like, here's a part where I'm really interested. I don't have a lot of experience. How can I go get that? Or here's a part, just like a real passport. There's places I want to go. There's places I know I don't want to go. For example, tax. Some people really want to spend a lot of time in tax and have a career in tax. Some people, it's very apparent right away that they have no interest in tax. And all of that, there's no right or wrong answer. It's very individual, but it's somewhat of a map that helps you think about your career, where you've been. There could be things that you think you have a lot of experience in, but you don't ever want to do that again, just like a place you don't really want to go again on your real passport. there are places that, you've got to find a way to get to. So it's really been, it's been well received. It's really helping to try to change that mindset to be less promotion based and more of a growth culture based.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate the explanation there. And if just kind of recap, I think you mentioned there were 5 areas: accounting, audit, tax, treasury, and business finance, our FP&A as the kind of the 5 areas, then obviously the CFO. What I like there is your focus of it no longer being a career ladder, right? That's how we all think about our career, but sometimes it's really moving and gaining different experiences. And like you mentioned, sometimes a lateral, as far as the role goes, may be a really good and the right move for your career because, hey, I need some experience as a controller. I need some time there if I want to be a CFO. And a lateral for 18 months is better than just continuing to move up this channel because it won't get me where I ultimately want to go. So I like that, like what you shared about Gartner, how there's really, when talking to them, there's not one path through finance, right? Everybody takes a different kind of road. They wind their path through finance. So, one thing you mentioned in there is you talked about one of the things you wanted was a growth, based culture. And then you also mentioned a promotion based culture. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yeah. Promotion based is really more thinking about every couple of years, I need to get, I was an associate, I need to be a senior associate, then I need to be a manager, then I need to be a senior manager. It's that mentality can sometimes paralyze people when they're thinking about their career. And there's been a number of times where people were presented fantastic opportunities to get, a different skill set than what they already have. But this concept of like, well, I'm a senior associate now, and that role is a senior associate. My next role really needs to be a promotion. Really trying to drive a different mindset, saying that it might not be a promotion per se, but when you look at how you're building out your resume, you're going to be able to add all of these things to it. And this is good for you in the long run, even though, from a title perspective, it might not have changed. It's very difficult because I think it's, there's a lot of pressure amongst everyone, right? Especially when you look on LinkedIn, everybody seems to have some fancy title and you're like, well, how do I get a fancy title? It's challenge, right? It is not easy to convince somebody that you are better off with this lateral. Sometimes it's maybe even a lower level on paper, but you are developing a skill set that you didn't have. And that makes you more marketable, both internally and externally. And that's the mindset I think you need to have in an environment that is ever changing. And I'll give you one more example that when you think about, from my experience, I mean, when, 10 years ago, it was thought this great job would be like a vice president of finance of a division, right? That would have been a great stop in my career. Well, through mergers and acquisitions and restructurings and reorganizations, that position doesn't even exist anymore. So if you have yourself focused on one particular role with one title, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. You have to be pretty agile in today's environment because it's on paper, it always sounds good. Like, well, I can just job hop or move somewhere else. And that's how I can continue to keep getting these titles. And sometimes that works, but in reality, it doesn't always work that way. It can be pretty difficult and pretty disruptive to your personal life to keep changing jobs, changing cities. You got to find a way to continue to grow within the confines of where you're at. Sometimes making a move is the right decision, but sometimes you've got to find development strategies within the organization you're currently in.
Got it. And your example there made sense to me of, hey, 10 years ago, I wanted to be this. Today, the role doesn't even exist. So being flexible and realizing that, growth within a company can happen, but you need to be patient and there's different paths you can take and put everything together for the benefit of the long run.
That's
Not
right.
always that short term, that next role, hopping every 8 months so you can get a better title on LinkedIn, right? Or whatever it might be.
That's right.
So how was this received at first? Did you get a lot of pushback when you rolled this program out? Or can you talk a little bit of just how adoption happened, how you were able to ingrain it in the, in the org and the culture?
Yeah, it's, let's say it's voluntary. It's 100% voluntary. And it's also a tool that you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And I think that's one message that we've been trying to push here in is really a life lesson, is that you have to own your own career because no one else is going to own it for you. So you have to put the time and effort into it. And generally speaking, your manager is more than happy to have these career discussions with you, but you've got to drive that. And you've got to say, these are the experiences that I'm missing. How can I get them? And one of the other themes of this passport and this growth culture is that you don't always have to change roles to get these skills. You can get these skills in different ways. You can be on a project. You can sometimes do like a brief rotational program or volunteer to help another department for a brief period of time. Teaching a course or teaching like a lunch and learn or something. All these things are ways that you can develop skill sets outside of your normal day-to-day job. So generally speaking, there are a lot of opportunities within a corporate environment to jump in on an HR project, to jump in on an M&A project. Those things that kind of push you out of your comfort zone, that when you're challenged, that's when real development happens. And how do you find those opportunities to challenge yourself and continue to check off boxes in that passport and increase your skill set, the different experiences you have that can, again, like I said, makes you more marketable both within and outside of the organization.
That makes sense. And I appreciate when you said 100% on your own, right? It's you that does it.
That's right.
You got to own your own career. This is a voluntary program and you got to be able to push yourself outside your comfort zone. As I've heard it said, and we've all probably heard something similar, right? The magic happens when we get outside our comfort zone. That's when real growth happens and we develop, because it's real easy. We're all, to some extent, creatures of comfort, and it's easy to get comfortable and not want to change. So I like how you challenge people to do that within the program. So one thing as I was reading through the program that I noticed is you talk about finance athletes and finance specialists. Can you tell our audience the difference between the two?
Sure. An athlete is someone who can be dropped into a number of different finance roles and be successful. They have an appetite for learning, for continuing to get these new experiences, to round out their resume, to be a well diversified financial professional, to be able to speak to the issues in audit, IT, FP&A, Treasury, compliance, the whole gamut, really with that mindset of ultimately striving to be a CFO, really being a leader in the finance department and being able to speak particularly about many different facets of what we do as finance professionals. The flip side of an athlete is a specialist, right? So a specialist develops deep expertise in one area, right? And I'll go back to the tax example. You can be a world-class tax person and really focus on all aspects of tax, in international tax, sales and use tax, really focused in one area. that's fine too. That's an excellent career path. And there's not a right or wrong answer. But you have to know which one you want to do. And you have to know the trade-offs of both, right? So if you're an athlete and you're willing to jump in, do a stint in internal audit because you think you would learn a lot about audit and operations, do a stint in Treasury or controllership and learn about the budgeting process and some of the accounting tools that we use and the software. You'll have a lot more opportunities as an athlete to go do different things. Your promotions may come a little bit faster. If you're a specialist, it's a fine career path as well. But know that you're going to have to spend a lot of time in one role. In your role is going to be a kind of a longer path to keep kind of moving up the ladder, so to speak. That if that is what your goal is, right? It's tougher. It's tougher. You're not going to get as many different experiences. You're going to spend a lot of time in getting that deep knowledge in one area. And both have fine career prospects. If you are a rock star in tax, you're going to be a hot commodity, right? But you're probably not going to be, maybe in rare cases, you might not have the breadth to be the CFO if you're not able to talk about some of the other aspects of, the other aspects of finance, the compliance pieces, the capital markets pieces, the FP&A pieces of it.
Got it. Thank you for that explanation. As I was sitting there listening to you describe that, I was thinking a little bit how you can relate that, finance athlete and finance specialist to sports, right? Baseball, you have the pitcher that's the closer. Yeah. He just comes in for the ninth inning and that's it. His job is very specialized. The designated hitter, very specialized. Yep. But then you have your utility infielder. One night he might be at shortstop. The next night he might be at second base. The next night he might be on the bench. It's changing depending on where they need him, just like in football, right? Quarterback, very specialized. But you occasionally have that guy like Taysom Hill is a player that comes to mind for me. He's played tight end. He's played on the defense. He's played on special teams. He's played wide receiver, quarterback, and running back, right? He's an athlete. You put him where you can use him and you make him work. There's just people that you want both in any organization. Like you said, one's not necessarily better than the other. They're different and they both have their benefits. It's knowing what you want to be and utilizing your strengths to accomplish your career.
That's a great analogy. And to your point, a designated hitter can do really well in the league, right? The utility player is very valuable as well. So it is, but you kind of have to know what do you want to be? Because that's going to influence some of your career decisions, right?
Exactly. Knowing who you want to be and where you want to be are going to help guide you so that you can get the most out of your finance passport and get, like, as you said, the countries or the role stamp that you want.
That's right.
You know what it is like. 13 different spreadsheets emailed out to 23 different budget holders. Multiple iterations, version control, errors, back and forth updates. You never really feel in control of the consolidation and collection process. Yep, I've been there. Stop, breathe. Datarails is the financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Datarails takes data from all your company's disparate sources. No organization is too complex, consolidating everything into one place, secured in the cloud. Now all your data finally talking to each other. Everything is automated back into your report in Excel. Cash flow, FX conversion, intercompany transactions, now automated and up to date. Drill down and variance analysis in seconds. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Turn your Excel into a lean, mean FP&A machine. Find out more at www.datarails.com. Next question I have here for you. I know, Hexion, you guys use a thing called the future resume. Yeah, this is the first time I'd ever heard that term when I was reading through your program. So maybe can you talk to our audience a little bit about what the future resume is and how you guys use that?
Yeah, that's an extension of the passport. And again, we were introduced by this concept from Gardner, and it's something that the Ford Motor Company uses, and is really thinking about what do you want your resume to look like in 5 years, and how do you work backwards to get there. So it's very much the same theme of the passport, but if I want to be in a certain role, there are certain skill sets I'm going to need to develop, and how do I think about getting those skill sets between now and in that time where I want that role. And it's a little bit still somewhat challenged, right? Because you don't always know that role that you want in 5 years is going to be there. Things change, right? But it still is more of a way of thinking about standing in the future. What do I need to do to get there? I think from a career perspective, especially in finance, we get stretched. There's fire drills every day, and you need to pause and think about what do I need to be doing to keep myself marketable, to keep growing in my career. Sometimes you're fighting fires all day. Those things can pass you by, and between the finance passport and the future resume, you should be having good, at least a mid-year discussion with your manager, or maybe even more frequently than that. Like, here are the things where I'd like to take my career. Can you help me? What can I do to go out and get these skills? What can I do to help get on these projects that I want to get onto? What can I do to help get there? And really, the whole goal of both the future resume and the passport is thinking about how do I get those skill sets I want to get to keep growing as a professional.
That makes sense to me. And I think the way I look at it as you've described that is really this whole program is designed to help the employee own their career and to get where they want to be, and take away the idea that, hey, we're just a promotion, we're just a ladder company, because that's not reality anymore.
That's right. Yeah, you've got to own your career, and it's your manager should be able to support you and help provide tools, but ultimately, it's something that you need to drive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Everybody needs to drive their own career. A manager is there to help remove roadblocks where he can, enable you to get the opportunities, but you have to deliver, and you also have to let them know what you want. They're not going to be able to tell what you want out of your career.
That's right, too. And it's also a great mechanism to get you and your manager on the same page.
I can see where this could be very beneficial to get the manager and you on the same page, because you've gone through and thought about where you want to be. You've done a future resume. You've rated yourself, and they can also look at those ratings and offer advice. And it's a very great way to start to help you develop those plans for the year and to make sure you're really developing versus just in a seat with the job. So since you've implemented the program, what would you say is the main benefit you've seen at Hexion?
Yeah, I think you are starting to see a change in mindset. It is driving a culture where, and I think if maybe in my career, if somebody would have said that a little more explicitly, you own your own career. It's not just no one's just gonna figure it out for you. I think that would have been helpful, to kind of figure that out a lot earlier. So I think it is driving a change in the culture. I think that it also helps when you have some of these conversations too, where you say, you get some people who are a little frustrated. I don't know what's next. What is it? Well, have you filled out the passport? Well, no. I mean, that kind of, as a manager that or a mentor, that also tells you something that, they're not really owning it. So it's, has definitely helped to drive great discussions between managers and mentors and associates. It's helped us to think differently as managers of how to get people involved in projects that will help get them some of these skill sets. How do you, we've done things like guest auditor programs where people express interest through the passport. How do you get some audit exposure? And you can go participate in some internal audits and not necessarily have to go into internal audit for a couple of years. Is really helped us think about how do you get different opportunities, on the job experiences, with not necessarily always having to create a formal change in position. So it's I think we still have a lot of work to do in terms of driving that culture. As I mentioned earlier, it is human nature to want to be promoted. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of peer pressure, and that won't go away. But the reality too is, in a flat organization, is just not always possible to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it's not always possible to promote people in a flat organization. But, as I listen to you talk about the benefits and as you've talked about the program so far, I wish I would have had something like this early in my career. I've done some different programs, but not this explicit and this well laid out. I think it would have really helped me, and particularly focusing on those special projects, like you mentioned, like carving something out to go over to audit. Like, I have no interest in being an auditor, but if I want to be a CFO, I got to understand audit, and working on some special projects would be a great way to get that experience without, spending 2 years in auditing.
Right.
And that is a great way to think about it, and to do those special projects to help people round out those skills without having to have a formal role. So, for someone in our audience is going, this sounds great, I would love to use something like a finance passport in my career. How would you tell them to get started, or what advice would you give somebody who wants to implement something like this in their career?
It's really thinking more about, how do I grow my resume? How do I grow the skills on my resume versus how do I limit my opportunities just because there's a title? So you may go get a new title, but you're not getting a lot more experience. There's some merit to that, but I think there's often more merit saying, if I go take this job that has a promotion, I might add 2 bullet points to my name or to my resume. If I go take this other one, I'm going to add 7 different skills that I could add. Just changing that mindset to, especially when you're early in your career, how do you grow your finance skill set? How do you develop a broad spectrum and not always just chase, just be so focused on, what is my title? What is my next, am I a senior associate or a manager? Or how do I focus more on the experience, the journey? Am I growing as a professional as opposed to, what is my title?
It's easy to get caught up in the title game and focusing on that. I can remember being there early in my career, and I remember I took one role and I tried to push for a senior manager title in the job, and they weren't willing to do it. And I took the job anyway, and I was really glad. I learned a ton in the experience. And a couple of years later, when I left, I'd been a director and managed a couple different divisions, and I got a lot of experience I wouldn't have had somewhere else. And so I can totally appreciate sometimes taking the lateral and letting go of the title is worth it. It can be really beneficial when it checks the right boxes and allows you to gain that experience you need in your career. But early on, it's hard for a lot of us to recognize that, because we're such a culture moving up driven career ladder society that people just get caught up, and I got to be in the name and I got to have the title.
Yes. And I mean, part of this project too was really, based on my own experience, my own journey. And so much of your career is based on timing, on external factors, event-driven, business needs, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures. it's a, the organization is a dynamic, growing, shrinking, changing organization. How do you strike this balance of supporting the company, continuing to advance in your career? And trust me, I've had title discussions too in my career. That's not lost on me. It's but it is one piece of the puzzle. You kind of have to find that North Star. Like, do I want to be a CFO? Is this career path? Is this next role? Is this going to help me on that journey, or is it going to take me off that journey? And there've been times where, there's some jobs with like fancy titles that aren't really going to help you grow anymore. You either kind of been there, done that, or it's not really something that's going to keep you on that path, but it's got a great title. You've got to find that filter, your own personal filter, that helps you sort through all that. And if it's the only filter is this a higher level than the last level, that's not always the right approach. It's am I growing my skill set? Am I keeping on a long-term path versus am I just taking this next role because it's more money, it's a higher title, it's a promotion, not a demotion, or a promotion, not a lateral, whatever it is. How do you change that mindset to more of a skill set based, as opposed to just this corporate ladder that isn't really always there anymore?
I'm going to repeat what you said for the audience, because it's a point that anyone earlier in their career really needs to listen to, is that idea of stop just thinking about the title, the money, the next promotion. Those are all important. But if you have a path and you know where you want to get, and you focus on getting the right skills and taking advantage of when the opportunity comes along, you'll be just fine in the end.
That's right.
As long as you do good work, you'll get promoted. The opportunities will come. So don't chase the promotion, chase the growth experiences that will allow you to become the kind of leader in the role you want to be in.
It's 100%. 100%.
Next question here. What would you recommend for a company? If somebody's listening out there, maybe a VP of finance or a CFO, and saying, hey, we need something like that at our company. We need to be more growth-based and implement a program like this. What advice would you offer them?
Well, first thing I would say, it is hard. So all those things that we mentioned, it will take time. It will resonate with some right away, and then you kind of come back to these title discussions, and it is human nature, and it's very difficult. But really, it's creating an environment that thinks about development and annual goals, right? An annual goal would be more short-term focused, more specific in terms of meeting the plan. What are we going to do? Development goal is more around education, growth, more long-term, developing a professional finance person. How do you have to have a balance of both those kind of business initiative goals that you set each year versus these development goals that are more educational, around finding the right opportunities, challenging people, finding those projects that are going to allow, maybe somebody who's an individual contributor on the org chart, an opportunity to lead a team by running a project. You might not have the capacity to give somebody 3 direct reports in a normal day-to-day role, but you have the opportunity to make them the project leader, and there's 5 people on that team. How do you keep growing the professional in the context of not always being able to change roles, and especially an organization that is flat and is lean?
That makes sense to me. Is really, if I'm hearing you right, 1, it's hard. It's a lot of work. You need to really be thinking about it. But 2, the key is really focusing on the development side. You should have the short-term goals in place. Most companies are pretty good at focusing on the goals and the numbers that need to be hit, but really spending that time to figure out how you help your employees and put that program in place to help with the development side of the career.
That's right.
Makes a lot of sense. So I know you work in Treasury today. Can you talk a little bit, kind of switching gears here? I appreciate all that on that program, and it sounds like, you've done a great thing there by implementing that. But maybe can you talk a little bit about how Treasury and FP&A work together? Now that you're in Treasury, how do the two coordinate? And then what makes a good partnership for Treasury and FP&A or business finance?
Sure. We work really well with our FP&A team. Our FP&A team is largely embedded in the business, more like a business unit CFOs. Mm-hmm. They do a great job of really understanding the drivers of their business, ripping apart the P&Ls every month, and delivering forecasts that we roll up into our forecasts, where we're doing both short-term cash flow forecasting and then more of the longer-term strategic model. So the businesses, we partner with them. They do a great job in terms of helping to articulate what their different initiatives are. They kind of own the P&L aspects of it, and then we're putting it more into income statement, cash flow, balance sheet perspective, more of a three-statement look. We work really well with them. We challenge them at times. They challenge us at times. We communicate well with each other, and we've got a great team. So the other thing that we work with them a lot is just our working capital, trying to understand the drivers. Treasury as a working capital has a huge impact on our cash flows, and really trying to work with the business, work with supply chain, making sure we're all on the same page, and really driving efficiency there where we can.
That makes sense to me. I appreciate you elaborating a little bit there. And it sounds like it works well, and you have a good structure, and your FP&A is mostly embedded. As you said, mini CFOs. I've filled that role a few times. It's typically where I've been in FP&A versus corporate. So, and that's where I like to be. That's where I say the fun happens, is when you're down there working with the business.
It is a very fun role. I've had a similar role in the past. You get to be like the co-pilot of the business. You really, like I said, ripping apart that P&L, understanding the drivers, helping, making recommendations, making decisions. The FP&A function is really highly valued in our organization.
That's great that they have high value and they're respected. That's what we like to see, because I think they can play a key role in businesses when they're allowed to, and they're given those opportunities to really partner and work with the business. So we're going to kind of shift gears here. We just have a little bit of time left. We have a couple standard questions we ask everybody,
Sure.
And we're going to go ahead and run through these. And the first is, we like to ask everybody to describe a time or an experience where they had a failure at work. Something didn't go the way they wanted. We've all had them. And what they learned from the failure. Maybe it could be an analysis that had gone wrong, an implementation or a change management that failed. And what was the learning or takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, I would say I think about some of the failures in my career. There are probably times where I was slow to speak up, or maybe not as forceful when I did speak up. And think about one time we were heading into a budget review. I had a conversation with my boss where we had recently inherited a business that the other business had already done a lot of work on their budget. And the conversation says, these guys aren't ready. They didn't really address the issues that need to be addressed. We really need to redo this. And, kind of got this pause from my boss. There's this, this is theirs. They can own it. We're just going to go in there and we'll support them. And, as I predicted, it was a disaster. I thought our CEO was going to throw me out the window. It was, at the end, it was like, why didn't you fix this? Why, not the guys that made the mess. It's why didn't you fix this? I'm like, well, at that point you can't just say, oh, well, I thought about it, but I brought it up. So you gotta, think as finance professionals, we're very analytical. Sometimes you think the numbers speak for themselves. You think that the issues are kind of black and white, or you've done all this analysis and it's just there. But you really have to be forceful in your persuasion and in your softer skills to say, like, here's what the data says, and now I have to smack you over the head with it. Because I got to drive it home, and that is my role, not just to put the numbers together, because not everybody interprets those things that you now think are black and white because you spent so much time on it. So you've got to, you've got to sell what you're seeing, and you got to tell them that's what the data says. This is the call to action. This is why we need to change our course. And, if I think about the regrets I've had in my career, it's like intuitively at some point I knew the right answer and I was there. It's like I didn't do enough to stop that train. And, how do you're not just a finance person, you're a leader. You have to change course.
What I'm hearing there is speak up, right?
That's 100%.
I like how you mentioned the numbers don't speak for themselves. We have to use persuasion. And when we're sure something's wrong, we have to make it very clear that our opinion's heard. Yeah, they may ultimately go ahead with it, but we want to do what we can beyond just being the squeaky wheel, but really being persuasive. And I'm reminded as you shared that story, I had one similar in my career where we had interviewed this person and I had the role previously. So they asked me to interview him and told the hiring manager, he goes, well, what'd you think? He checks all the boxes. But, one, there's something not right about his resume and everything. I can't give you an exact reason, but everything tells me you should not hire this person. I would not hire him if I was you. He said, oh, well, that's nice. But they checked all the boxes. They went ahead and hired him, and it was a complete disaster. And I wish I would have been more forceful and found a better way to articulate what had been going on, because it put everybody back 6 months. Because now they had somebody that they put in a role that failed, that shouldn't have been in the role, and they weren't getting the work done on top of that. So it was impacting not just that person, but everybody else. I really appreciate the speaking up and being persuasive, because sometimes we let things slide. It's like, well, I can't really do anything, or they'll recognize it when it's a train wreck.
That's right. That's right. And it's your job to stop the train wreck, not to tell them, well, I saw it coming.
Nobody wants to hear "I told you so" after the fact. Nobody wants to hear
"I told you so." That's right. That's right.
That makes a lot of sense. So next question here. This is one kind of personal that we ask everybody to just get to know them a little bit. What is something unique about yourself that we wouldn't find online? Something you could share with our audience.
So I'll go with, we talked a little bit about college football before. So it's the 100th anniversary of the Ohio Stadium, the Horseshoe, this year. So that was actually my dorm room in college. I lived in the stadium for 4 years. So it's not there anymore, but they had a dorm that hung from the west side of the stadium, and there were about 300 people that lived there. It was actually a co-op, so it was a scholarship. It's a combination of financial need and academic achievement. So you worked in that dorm for 7 to 10 hours a week. In return, it was cheaper than some of the other dorms on campus. But yeah, so I worked my way through college. Part of the way was living actually in Ohio Stadium.
That is a cool story. So I have one follow-up question to that.
Sure.
Could you see the game from where your dorm rooms were? Were you able to look down on the stadium and watch a game?
No. So most of the rooms did not have windows. So there were rooms that were kind of facing outside, kind of towards the parking lot, or towards the south end of the stadium that had some windows. I actually had a window at one point there. But yeah, it was, you actually had to kind of leave the dorm and go into the stadium to actually see the game. Still, there are ways to sneak in, but you actually
Wait,
needed a
college
ticket.
students sneak into a game? I can't see that happening.
Exactly.
No, that makes sense. All right. So next question here. What is your favorite Excel formula?
So, seeing some of your other guest responses here, so I'll try to go with one I don't think was picked yet, but I would go with the if statement. Good old fashioned if. I think that's been really helpful in creating a lot of versatility in some of the spreadsheets we've created, especially at scenario analysis. And there's some other ways to do that too, but we've created some pretty cool things, largely based on the if function.
I like that one. I don't think we have had that one, and it's a simple function to use, and it's very versatile.
Yeah.
So I like that. All right. So last question we have for you before we let you go is, what advice would you offer to someone starting their career in FP&A or, finance in general today? What would be the advice you'd offer to that person?
Yeah. Maybe a little similar to the theme of my failure. Don't forget to focus on the communication skills. It's very important. Again, as finance people, there's so many times you dive into the data really deep and you think you have the answer. But that's really being able to articulate that to someone else can be a challenge, especially in finance, I think. And many times I see, you ask a simple question and you ask what time it is, and someone wants to tell you how to make the watch. Or in finance, especially, sometimes you just want a simple yes or no question. You ask a yes or no answer. You get 10 megabytes and nowhere is the word yes or no. So you've got to find a way to take all that data that you manage and all the analytics and find a way to simplify that and give people crisp, clear answers in understand what is your intent with that answer. Is it a call to action? Is it to inform? What do you want people to do with that information that you're giving them? It's I'm a big fan of the pyramid principle too, right? So it's you start with the punchline, and you can drill down in more details, but the reader should know what you're getting at very quickly, and give them the opportunity to continue to drill down, especially in a world where we're drowning in emails and drowning in megabytes of data. You've got to simplify the message.
I like that. Simplify the message. I had a manager, the way he described it, you mentioned the pyramid principle, is he called it bluff. It's like, give me the bottom line up front. Just put it in bold. Tell me what I need to know. Then you can get to the details afterwards. And he called it the bluff method. And that's always stuck with me. It really helped me learn how to take it up to a higher level, because I struggled, as I think many people in finance do, with getting into the details and wanting to tell the nitty gritty. And it's like, Dermot, I don't need to know the nitty gritty. Let me know what I need to know to influence the business. You learn and work on that stuff. So I appreciate that answer. Well, thank you for being on the show today, Jeff. We've really enjoyed having you, and I'm excited to share this episode with our audience and give them the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the finance passport and the exciting things you guys are doing at Hexion.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a lot of fun.